Hi, I'm Mike Calderon with Horse Racing Simulations Horse Race Fantasy Game, and today we're going to have a real special conversation with one of the world's greatest jockeys, Chris McCarron, and we're going to get some insight from Chris on some of the greatest horses he rode, like Precisionist, Ali Sheba, John Henry, and we're going to ask him how should our jockeys inside of our fantasy game ride those horses. So we're in for a great treat, and we'll be talking to Chris in just a minute here at Hollywood Park, July 5th, Big Stakes Day. Hi, Mike Calderon with Horse Racing Simulations, and today I'm here with a very special guest, one of the nation's leading jockey of all times, Chris McCarron. And Chris, welcome, and thanks for taking the time with us today.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
We just spent a few minutes with Chris showing him our simulation game, and Chris, first of all, what do you think overall?
It's pretty impressive. Looks like it's a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to trying to figure out how to play the game. I'm not real computer savvy, but it looks like it's pretty user-friendly.
You've ridden a lot of great horses in your life. The first one that comes to my mind is the great John Henry. And we feature a lot of these great horses inside of our game. If we could just talk about some of these horses and maybe give some of our young jockeys hints on how to ride these horses in the game, that'll be great. Maybe we can start with John Henry, a little bit about him and how our jockeys should ride him inside the game and what to avoid and what to do and what not to do.
Well, John Henry is a perfect example of a horse that was pretty much easy to ride, you know. So all those future jockeys out there, you're going to be challenged because it was pretty hard to mess up on John Henry. He was such an outstanding individual, such a great athlete, and such a determined athlete. He always wanted to win, so it was pretty hard to mess up on him. However, I will say, though, he almost never ran the same type of race in a row.
You mentioned some other great names, and one of the greatest horses I remember is Ali Sheba. I mean, that horse just blew my mind. Inside of our game, how would you tell our fans to ride that horse?
Ali Sheba was a horse that didn't want to be rushed. You know, you come out of the starting gate and kind of let him place himself. Usually it was further back than mid-pack, especially early in his 3-year-old season. He would come from way behind, as he did in the Derby and the Preakness. But later on, when he turned 4, he came out of the gate running a little bit more aggressively and showed a little bit more speed and would lay closer to the pace than he would as a 3-year-old. But he was the type of horse that didn't want to be hit a lot. You know, you could hit him to encourage him to go on when it came time, but he was not a horse that wanted a lot of stick. So when you're riding him, be careful. You come down through the lane, you hit him, he'll pin his ears, he'll raise his head a little bit like that and say, don't do it again. But he'll go ahead and give you everything he's got. He was a very competitive horse.
Talk about Precisionist, another great racehorse. Precisionist was, in my opinion, just had a super turn of foot.
Well, he certainly did. Precisionist was a very brilliant racehorse. He won stakes. He won Grade 1s going from 3/4 of a mile all the way up to 1.25 miles. Just an incredibly wonderful racehorse. A lot of intelligence as well. When he was a 2-year-old, he was always real nervous on the racetrack and would expend a lot of energy before he'd go out and breeze or race. But Ross Fenstermaker did a marvelous job with him, getting him to settle down in the mornings, which caused him to settle down in the afternoons, which enabled him, that settling down enabled him to carry his speed over distance of ground. He was really cut out to be a miler. 7/8 of a mile or a mile was his really best distance. But he became such a cooperative racehorse over time that he was able to go ahead and carry his speed over 1.25 miles, where he beat Greenton and Gate Dancer in the Stroob. He won the swaps here at Hollywood Park, going 1.25 miles. He ran 2 minutes flat or something like that, and drew off at the head of the lane like a true route horse.
Let me just ask you this, Chris. To our jockeys out there just getting started inside the game, couple of hints. What would you tell them? Basic as far as riding hints, getting on the horses and getting ready to race. What advice would you give them when they're playing in the beginning and they're not winning a lot of races, or they're exerting too much energy in the beginning? What advice can you give them?
The best advice I can give young riders is to study as much as they can, watching the more successful riders that they're competing against with regard to their style. What makes them tick, what makes them successful, and try to incorporate some of that idea, some of those realities, not just concepts, but realities into developing their style.
We're standing here with Chris McCarron, not only one of the greatest jockeys of all time, being part of history, but also now giving back and helping build for the future of horse racing. Chris, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I appreciate all the time you've given us today.
Thank you, Michael. My pleasure.